assistance needs
You
to.
got this mic and we put on, or, start screaming.
All right, then I need to, we can, you want to move this over here, that's, I'm gonna use it. Does that work?
That work for you, Lynn?
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? You good? All right, you hear me now? Okay. I'm gonna be talking about BABA, and BABA stands for Build America, Buy America. And the way I'm going to go about this is, I like to understand how I got to where I am. And so we're gonna go back a journey on down memory lane to see how we got to BABA. And to me, I found some interesting things about this. But we're gonna talk about the Buy America Act, American Iron and Steel, the SRF program, and the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. All of this came before BABA. And so, first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about, this is not the first time our country has done this. And the balance of, talk a little bit about balance of trade. And balance of trade is one of the key components of the country's gross domestic product. And our gross domestic product increases when there's a trade surplus. And it goes down when we have a trade deficit. And we're a victim of our own success. This chart right here gives the U.S. trade balance to gross domestic product from 1800 to 2018. And what you'll see is from 1800 to about 1870, we ran a negative. And basically what that means is we were buying more stuff overseas than we were buying inside this country, when you looked at what we were actually in relation to what we were actually producing. Then from 1870 up to 1970, we were selling more overseas than we were buying from overseas. And when you start thinking, what caused these two peaks here, this is World War I, and this is World War II. So when you've got a battle going on, and somebody else's country is tearing up their manufacturing capacity, they come to us to buy goods and services. Then we get to 1970, and then we see a steady decline up to where we are today. What was going on in 1970? In 1970, two things in my mind happened. One is we began to talk about globalization. I remember my uncle and my father-in-law were all in the textile business. If you lived in South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, you probably had somebody related to you that worked in the textile business. All of that started moving out of the country. And that was part of globalization. The other thing that happened is there was a gentleman whose last name was Deming that wrote a book on incremental quality improvements. And he tried to sell it to manufacturers in the U.S., but they wouldn't listen to him, so he went to Japan. And all this stuff, where it used to be, if you bought something from Japan, it was junk. He showed them how to make things to where they were good products. And I can remember when I started college, people were buying Nissans 280Zs for $1,800, $1,900. It was a great little sports car. It ran forever, and it outlasted the Japanese products, outlasted the American products. So we found people were making things, making quality things. So whereas our quality standards were not what they needed to be, so our economy started to go down with regard to the trade surplus. So where am I going with all of this? The government looks at this, and they have to start to try to figure out, how do we start to fix this with the rules that they have to work with. The first was in 1933, so that's 90 years ago, we had our first Buy American Act. It was the Buy American Act of 1933, and it required the federal government to buy American-made iron, steel, and manufactured goods wherever possible. Then things would go along okay. Then 1972, the Clean Water Act came about. And the Clean Water Act started establishing regulations on water being put back into our rivers and streams. And as a result of those regulations, that started another industry on how to clean these effluents up that were going back into these streams so we wouldn't destroy our rivers and streams. Then came about the Surface Transportation Act of 1982, and that was a separate policy known as Buy America. This is our second Buy America that was enacted, and it governed procurements that were funded through the Department of Transportation. So the Department of Transportation entered into the Buy America Act in 1982. And then in 1987, Congress amended the Clean Water Act and created the Clean Water State Revolving Fund to finance projects to improve water quality, which we know is SRF. So that's now that they allow the state to get in the business of being able to finance projects to improve clean water systems. Then we get to 2009, and the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act came about, and it created another standard which applied to all projects with Recovery Act funds. The new Recovery Act standard is distinct from the others in that it superseded the other two requirements for Buy America that would normally apply. Then we move on along and we get to the Consolidated Appropriation Act of 2014, and this included the AIS requirement for drinking water and clean water programs through the end of year fiscal 18. This occurred on January the 17th of 2018. 2014, I mean. Then we have the Water Resources and Reform Development Act that made AIS permanent for the Clean Water SRF program, and this occurred on June the 10th of 2014. And then we have America's Water Infrastructure Act of 2018 that extended the AIS requirements for drinking water projects through September 30th of 2023, and this occurred on October 23rd of 2018. And then finally, we get to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Legislation Bill, and it made AIS permanent for drinking water SRF projects and added BABA for all projects. So we started in 1933, we get to Bill, and that's when BABA came about. It went into effect on May the 14th of 2022. Why did all this occur? With the SRF program's success, it was recognized that a significant portion of the dollars being expended were actually going outside of our country, which was demonstrated in our chart, where purchased products were cheaper. Taxpayers, while seeing the benefits to our society of the SRF programs, were also seeing their dollars going outside of our country to purchase products rather than using those dollars to purchase items inside of our country. The purpose of both AIS and BABA is to slow the export of our dollars to other countries. This was accomplished by requiring certain components to meet made in the USA quality criteria, which brings us to BABA. Now, BABA, what it states is none of the funds made available for a federal financial assistance program for infrastructure may be obligated for a project unless all of the iron, steel, manufactured products, and construction materials used in the project are produced in the United States. And this, so what I try to explain to people is when you think about BABA, it's easier to think about trying what doesn't BABA cover and make the implicit assumption that BABA covers everything unless it's explicitly exempted. For example, when you look at cement and you look at aggregates, they are excluded from BABA. So the cement companies can import cement, the aggregate companies can import aggregates, and they are not covered by BABA. Whereas if you're buying a pre-stressed concrete beam, that's covered by BABA because that's going to be considered a manufactured product that's made in this country. And BABA applies, again, to all federal financial assistance for infrastructure, not just bill funding, unless covered by a waiver. And this is what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about, is waivers, because it's important that you understand the waivers, because it's your responsibility as loan recipients as well as engineers to know when you probably should be asking for a waiver or what would qualify for a waiver. So first, what is a project? under VABA is any activity that's related to the construction, alteration, maintenance, or repair of infrastructure in the U.S. Just as a side note, if you're talking about desks and chairs like y'all are sitting on here, that wouldn't be covered by VABA. But the building would be covered by VABA. The air conditioning systems would be covered by VABA, but incidentals do not get covered by VABA. The benefits of VABA: it establishes a strong and permanent domestic sourcing requirement across all federal financial assistance programs for infrastructure. It provides an opportunity to build a resilient supply chain and manufacturing base for official products in the United States, for critical products, I should say. It will help spur our investment in good paying American manufacturing jobs and businesses. That's been one of the globalization has helped this country, but one of the ways it's hurt this country is that we have allowed a lot of good manufacturing jobs to leave this country. VABA is going to help bring those manufacturing jobs back to this country. Now, the price that we're going to pay is just going to be more expensive because of the wage structure and the standard of living that we're used to. But it will have a benefit of creating better paying jobs in this country. There are three basic types of waivers. There's conditional and targeted limited. There's a small project waiver, and there's a de minimis general applicability waiver. The conditional and targeted limited waiver. This waiver covers projects that have initiated design planning prior to May 14, 2022. The statutory effective date of the VABA requirements is May 14, 2022. Anything after that date will have to meet 100% VABA. Prior to that, you can get one of these transitional waivers because the actual VABA, the Bill Act that included VABA, that was passed 6 months prior. The purpose of these waivers: initiated project design planning means documentable efforts made by SRF assistant recipients to evaluate and identify both technologically and financially viable options. So what that says is you can't just say, I had an idea that we need to do this. You also have to put money to it to where it becomes a real project to qualify for that waiver, capital improvement project. These efforts typically start with prepared technical documents describing professional engineering designs. Because the SRF programs are pass-through programs operated through state funding authorities, the state programs will be responsible for assessing and documenting the design status relative to this waiver. So all your waiver requests will come through the SRF program. You will not go directly to EPA. EPA says, we delegated these programs to the states. If you are requesting a waiver, you need to come up through the SRF program. And the waiver covers, and this is the different steps for the waiver. SRF program shall ensure that all projects shall ensure that all the projects subject to the conditions of the waiver provide evidence of initiating design that qualifies the project for this waiver, and shall maintain this evidence with project files for state requirements or for 3 years after completion of the project, whichever is greater. So this is tied to the project as opposed to if a project may have certain construction packages to it, you have to maintain the waiver after the completion of the project, not the sub-package. If the project can provide evidence with any of the following conditions prior to May 14, 2022, to qualify under this waiver, and the conditions are, you submitted a preliminary engineering report. So if you had your preliminary engineering report prior to May 14 of 2022 to the state, then pretty much you're going to qualify. But as I'm saying this, one of the things you all need to keep in mind is with all of these waivers that we talk about, it's the recipient's responsibility to apply for the waiver. You don't just say, well, we got the waiver because we submitted the PDR prior to the May 14, 2022 date. You have to make a formal request for the waiver, and we have to go through the formal documentation process. It's not automatic. Another qualifier is issue a request for proposal or execution of a contract for design and engineering service. Or you could do an execution of an FRS assistance agreement that included design. Or a project, as for a project designed by the assistant recipient documentation of design initiation. Good example of that is some of your bigger utilities, they have their own engineering departments internal. They will do these project designs, and then once they decide that it's a project that they want to do, they will go out and move forward with acquiring funds for it. The work that they're doing inside would allow them to qualify for a waiver, even if they had not submitted a PER for that waiver. Then you got solicitation of construction contract bids before that date as a qualifier. Submitted plans and specifications to state authority as a qualifier. Public referendum or public meeting held regarding the project is a qualifier. And evidence of new bonds passed other than funding backing secured for the project is a qualifier. So any one of those items would allow you, if they occurred prior to this date, May 14, 2022, would allow you potentially to qualify for the waiver. If the project did not provide, if you didn't have any of that, then you come down to this one, which is kind of a catch-all. If a project did not provide any of the above evidentiary documentation, but you're sufficiently far along enough that you say the BABA is going to be a detriment to the project proceeding, then you can still possibly qualify for the waiver. But again, you would need to come to us, and then we would discuss it, and then we would forward it to EPA for an opinion of whether or not it would qualify. So if you had a project, didn't meet any of this, but you said, hey, we've got this thing moving along, and we really should be qualifying for it, we discuss it, if we're on board with that, then we'll get it submitted to EPA for you so that they can render an opinion as to whether or not it would qualify. And then finally, SRF program shall, that we're responsible now for updating the SRF system with the appropriate fields for projects qualifying for this waiver. Project data must be entered by the end of the quarter in which the assistance agreement was signed. Then we get to the SRF program shall maintain a list of all projects qualifying under this waiver so that we can supply it to the EPA upon request, and they won't request it, if not request it no more frequently than twice per year. But what that tells you is the EPA is going to be looking at these waivers, it is going to be auditing it, and one of the things I've realized in the brief time I've been with them working in the SRF section is the EPA is very serious about seeing that these projects are operating, these loans and programs are operated according to the rules that they lay out. And they intend for us to comply with that. And they do very thorough audits when they come through to look at what we're doing to make sure that we are complying. But the information that we would provide to the EPA, the project name, loan number, description of sufficient manufactured products or construction materials, and it'll be up to 10 items. It has significantly more than 10 significant manufactured products. You can include those, but use your best engineering judgment. These are questions that we're going to ask you to provide to us so we can fill in the paperwork that we need to send to EPA. The fourth item here, though, and Eric had mentioned this before, AIS requirements cannot be waived. So there is no such thing as an AIS waiver. This targeted and conditionally targeted limited waiver is intended to allow people to transition from an AIS world to a BABA world, with the BABA world containing an AIS. But the EPA's position is you have already been operating with AIS, so there would be no reason for you to come and ask for a waiver to AIS. Then you have a small project waiver, and I find this one fairly intriguing, but this is a general applicability waiver for small projects where system agreements or sub-awards under system agreements are less than $250,000. What that basically says is if you're a small community, this is the reason it was designed or put in the program, if you're a small community and you're doing a small project, then you don't, the EPA is not going to expect you to meet FABA requirements. The only thing I would say generally about this, regardless to whether it's the small project or the sub-award, make sure that you've left enough room in your project when you ask for this waiver, that there's no way you're going to run the project over. Because if you run over 250,000, our interpretation of that is you're going to now put yourself in a situation that you're going to have to be bothered. So you need to be very careful of that when you come to that. But the interesting part here is the sub-award part. Because that, to me, says you might be a contractor that has $1 million project, but if you have 3 areas in that project that you can carve out to where they would be standalone projects, and they're less than 250,000, then you could ask for this waiver. Now, we haven't actually done that yet, but in reading the language, to me, it gives you the flexibility to be able to do that. And then you have the de minimis general applicability waiver, and that's a general applicability waiver for products used and incorporated into a project that cumulatively comprise no more than 5% of the total project cost. And underline this because when you look at AIS, AIS focuses on material costs. This is project cost. It's 5% of the project cost. Because you not only have iron and steel, you've got construction materials, and you've got other things that wouldn't come under iron and steel, but would be covered by BABA. So you're looking at 5%. And when you stack them all up on top of each other, because they are not additive, you've got, for BABA, you've got 5% of the total project cost. When you look at AIS, it's 5% of the total project material cost, or it can be 1% of the total project material cost for any one item. But what the thing you have to guard against is you can't say I've got 5% AIS and I've got 5% here, it's 10, because this 5% is 5% of the total project cost. So if you're doing something that has to do with AIS, if you meet this, then obviously you should be able to meet that, because this is going to be less than the total project cost. But you can't go and think you got AIS type things and it's 5% of the total project cost, because it's going to revert back down here to the AIS requirement of the 5%. So you need to think about those things when you're looking at waivers. And again, they're not additive, so you need to look at them as being individual things. And that's my Bible presentation.
Thanks, John. All right. You might as well just stay. So at this point, we'll open it for some questions and answers. And I see we've got some on Teams, so we can start with that as well. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Sharon's really short. Okay, so first question, will we have access to the PowerPoint? Yes, we will send these out to all attendees once we finish. Let's see, is there an obligation with the pre-application process? I think that's a great question, and one I usually mention. Absolutely not. We are not looking to strap you with more unneeded fees, or, you know, if you apply and don't get what you want, you can withdraw freely. That's no issue. How much is ADEM's annual admin fee? Is this in addition to the 2.2% interest? It is not. Sorry, I don't think I explained that very well. It will still be 2.2% interest, and like last year was 199, for instance. But now it will say there's a certain portion of that 2.2 that is admin versus interest. So we just have to display it differently. The actual number will not change. How is the principal forgiveness applied to the loan? Right up front. So if you get $1 million loan with $1 million principal forgiveness, your loan repayment is gonna say 0 when you get it. Okay? I think that was all the team's questions. We got any in the room? Any that are interested? Sure, what you got?
So we've had a previous, drinking water SRF application we submitted, probably a year or so ago that was not
Yes.
funded or shown as funded. Because of other time constraints, we've had to proceed with that project. And do we need to submit a formal letter requesting that to be taken out of the
It doesn't have to be formal.
consideration? 'Cause we want to submit another drinking water one, but it's a different project.
Yeah.
So that would look better for us if we withdrew that application.
Yes, because I mean, we're essentially gonna rank that one, and then when we call you, you're gonna say, we've already done this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you have a project you wanna replace it with, what I would do is when you submit the pre-app, just say, we're withdrawing the other project.
Okay.
That's no issue. And y'all can freely, change, modify the project, but keep in mind, every time you modify it, it kind of lengthens the timeline for us to review, right? Because we are looking at these in depth. But yes, please, any projects you still have, submit them now. Now is the time. We definitely want them as well. That's a good question.
Eric, can you please repeat that question for those online?
Oh, sure. Oh gosh, now I'm blanking. Why'd you ask me? So the question is essentially, if he had already had a project that was funded, should he, notify us withdraw or add a project to it? Either way works. You can withdraw, you can add another project, replace it, that's all fine. There's no penalty there.
Okay, we do have some more questions in the chat.
Okay. Did you send them down?
Can we done?
Oh, I got it. Okay, so. Sorry guys, bear with us. Okay, the floodplain description discussed. Will the description notes go in the EID or on the maps? Yes, just somewhere in the EID. What I would do is just put like a title that's, attached floodplain maps and just say, as noted in the maps, there are no issues, with the floodplain map. Something, again, just have something where in layman's terms, people can understand when they're reading these, instead of just looking at the map and saying, I don't know what I'm looking at. Do the BIL supplemental general conditions apply to ARPA and SRF construction bids? No. There will be separate ones. Now, with that said, a lot of the same requirements will apply, but you will have separate SGCs for SRF, BIL, and not ARPA, just SRF and BIL. ARPA can be used either one, that's not a problem. It's a little more flexible. And we will be sending out more information on those. Essentially, they're getting drafted up now. We've got some language in our loan docs, as I mentioned earlier, that's still being worked out. And we're working closely with EPA to get that done. So we're hoping any day or week now, we'll send out the updated SGCs and updated BIL information. Some of those loans are starting to close now, and I expect them in the next few months to be all closed, hopefully. Sure.
Using all the questions.
No, that's no problem.
So when we receive an award letter or, approval for funding, it will state in there whether it's ARPA or BIL or what funding source that we're having to work with?
That's a good question. I do not believe at this point we do. The question was, if you get a fundability letter, will it say if you're getting ARPA, SRF, and BIL? The ARPA ones are very specific. The other ones are a little more general. We'll do a better job of that, though. I'll make sure that everybody's aware. Again, when in doubt, your references are our website. The IUP is for SRF and BIL. The ARPA information update, I think is what we call it at this point, has if you're funded or not in general. That has both. So like I said, it may say you got funded, $1 million, but you're unfunded $400,000. Well, if we told you you're fully funded, what that means is you got $1 million in grant and $400,000 in some other form, SRF, BIL, or home funds. So that should be notated on the website. If you look at the AM, SRF, ARPA website, that should give you all the information you need. If you have any questions, we can confirm or help you from there as well. That should help. And we're trying to keep that up to date as of every Friday at 2. It should be up to date. Yes, so Pamela asked, are you going to recommend BABA construction contractor language, or do we use the federal BABA language? Yes, so in the SDCs, that will have the language. Now, to be honest with you, it'll probably be mostly the federal language, but we will do that for you. Don't go out on that limb without us giving you that. We try to give you as many templates and guidance documents as we can. I think that's all we got. Yeah, what you got?
Eric, with the newspapers going to online, have y'all had any talks with the state about changing the bid law for over 500,000? Because they still require us to go to 3 statewide papers.
Yeah, and that's essentially what ours says too. We have no control over these.
I know, I just didn't know if maybe y'all talked to the state.
We can attempt. I think at this point though, I don't, it may have to be like us. Like technically the papers are still doing it. It's just not as intended back in the day.
Yeah.
We are thinking we're gonna go to online only. Again, tentatively at this point, but the state bid law, yeah, there's no change at this point. He asked if we were going to change the language of the Alabama state bid law to include, the newspaper, essentially going away. Good question. The other thing I wanted to mention with BABA as well is ultimately it is the borrower's responsibility to do these waivers. But what I would tell you is, again, do not get out there in front of it without us confirming. What I'd recommend is you get some documentation from us saying you did get the waiver. Because like John said with the 250,000 thing, say your project's 249,000. If you make that assumption and you go over, you are then no longer eligible, okay? So we will talk to you about that, especially if it's something close. If y'all are applying for the small waiver, we're gonna be very concerned if you're close to 250. It's gotta be 200,000. Now, give yourself some room there. Otherwise, we're gonna conservatively tell you to do it. And again, any questions, please reach out before getting in front. We don't want y'all getting in front and then y'all, that's y'all's cost going forward because you're ineligible. So let us know, we'll give you the guidance documents and the templates so we can make sure it's right.
Don't give up. I got another question. Just listen to John. You said there was a waiver if you did like a PDR before May of 22?
That's correct.
Most of our PDRs were submitted by then, so
That's correct.
could we submit to y'all and ask for that waiver?
Yeah, essentially, I would just send us something saying, you know, essentially, he said you have to provide documentation
Right.
showing that. So I would send something saying, all, this pre-app was before, or preliminary report was before May of 22, and therefore there is it.
So we could use like the response from your SRF saying you've received it?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll add you, essentially, we're gonna keep a database. That's what, but we are not gonna put you in that database by ourselves. It's gonna be you requesting that, and then
Okay.
we'll confirm.
Thanks.
And he had asked, I'm sorry, if what kind of response for the AIS we would get. Again, we will confirm that for you, so when you request a waiver, you will get a response, and you can use that as documentation for the waiver.
When will we be notified of the principal forgiveness?
Sure, so when you're notified of the principal forgiveness is at what we call a fundability letter. So once we develop our IUP, it goes through notice, we send out letters saying, essentially, here's what you got. So it'll be, you got $1 million with 500,000 principal forgiveness or something of that nature. So sometimes people can be a little confused with principal forgiveness. Again, we don't call it grant because grant comes with a whole nother line of reporting, et cetera, et cetera. But for all intents and purposes, you are getting your loan cut by that amount, up front. So we will tell you that. You'll have essentially, again, $1,500,000, so then your payback will be $500,000 plus 2.2% interest. And if you, I can also do, again, with so many projects, I hesitate saying this, I can also do draft schedules, we can do construction periods, so if it's something you have a question about or you want to see, I have no issue providing that for you ahead of time.
I think one of the questions is that obligates himself to one,
Sure.
he will know what preference goodness is.
That's right, and if it's not what you want, you don't have to take it. Again, no obligation. I do not want to put a community in a bad position, but we are here to help you, not to saddle you for debt, okay? So if it is something you can't afford, let us know, we will work with you. But it has to truly show in the documentation too, because we are reviewing yearly financial audits, and they are official, so we have to go with those. So we need justification why that would change, et cetera, et cetera. But again, if we offer you something and you don't want to take it, you don't have to. I do want to make that clear. Okay? Anything else?
We still have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sean. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so did I understand that we need to submit the last three audits or just the last one? So again, this is the confusing part because we're mixing programs. For the SRF and BIL, in order to close a loan, we have to have the three most recent financial audits. However, to rank projects, to get you on the list and to do ARPA, we just need the most recent. So what I'd recommend is if you're struggling or you don't have audits, get us the most recent ASAP so we can get you ranked. And then we can give you a tentative offer and say pending you completing the requirements, okay? Get in to get ranked. I cannot stress that enough. Do not wait. Get us in anything. You got a project, you got a number, you've done a PER, get it in. You got a 0% chance if you don't apply.
Is there an age limit on the most recent audit? In other words, would you accept an audit from 2018?
It's a good question. So our cutoff every year is March. So we're in March right now. So come April 1st, we will be asking for 2022. So there is a time limit cutoff. Again, we can make tentative offers. So if you say, hey, all I got is 2017, we'll take that. We'll make a tentative offer, but it's not going to be accurate because we're talking about 5-6 years. So when we get the new one, we may have to adjust. And we will tell you that. It will not be a final offer until we get the confirmed audits. So yes, the most recent is the most important one, and then we can work on the rest. And I know that's not practical in most cases, I understand, but again, we can pay for them as well. So if that's a problem, let us know, we'd be happy to help there. Good question. Okay. Anybody else? I'll let y'all have a good 30 minutes early. Well, we will be hanging around, staff is around, I'll be here today, so if y'all have any more questions or want to talk to me, please feel free to let me know. Thank y'all for coming, we appreciate it.